Hi girls, today we're going to talk about chapter 2, section 2, about the free markets. So if you remember, we are talking about different types of economic systems. The first one we learned about in our previous section were traditional economies. So those were those very primitive, family-based, very rural economic systems where they weren't innovative or adaptive to technology. Today, we are going to talk about our second economic system, which is the free market. So this is what we're going to talk about today, why they exist. We're going to look at a flow model of free market economy. We're going to look at the self-regulating nature of the marketplace and identify the advantages of having a free market economy. All right, so what do farmers markets, a sporting goods store, the New York Stock Exchange, Amazon.com, babysitting advertisement all have in common? Well, they're all examples of markets. So what is a market then? It's simply an arrangement that allows buyers and sellers to exchange things, money, goods, services, etc. So obviously on Amazon.com, you're buying goods. Same with a sporting goods store if you go to Stop and Shop. But you can also buy a service such as babysitting. You can go get your hair cut. Any type of buyer and seller exchange is at a market. So on a piece of scrap paper, write down the last 3 places you shopped. Given our current situation, this has probably all been online shopping, but let's try to think of some of our favorite stores or online sites that we like to shop. So if you think about it, possibly Stop and Shop, Forever 21, Target, CVS, maybe these are some of the online stores you shop at. Sephora, perhaps some prom dress sites, right? So which of those markets meets most of your needs? And how many of these markets do you see yourself revisiting on a regular basis? So what I'm trying to get you girls to think about in this exercise is that the sporting goods store or even Sephora, that's not going to meet all of the needs that you have on a day-to-day basis, right? Great, you can get all your makeup, but what about food? What about clothing? What about getting your car fixed, etc., right? So the point is that, we need multiple markets, right? And if there's a market that we need that doesn't exist, then new markets will open. So as we go through this lesson, you'll see more and more about that, right? So markets exist because of specialization. So we're not all self-sufficient. Being self-sufficient means that, we could do everything on our own, okay? But in fact, we all specialize. So each one of us producers does 1 or 2 things or produces 1 or 2 products. So if you're a nurse, you take care of the sick. If you're a baker, you make breads and cakes, right? If you're a teacher, you educate your students. So that is specialization. So the concentration of productive efforts of individuals and firms on a limited number of activities, okay? This leads to a very, very efficient use of resources, including land, labor, and capital, right? It's easier to learn one or a few tasks well than to learn them all. And if you just think of your own life, or for me, for example, so I'm a teacher, so I concentrate my efforts, right, my job into teaching. I do not, I can't build my own house. I can't heat my own home. I can't sew my own clothes. I probably could cut my own hair, but I don't want to. I don't think it would turn out too well, right? So that's why I go into the markets. I hope this is making sense, because I'm not self-sufficient, right? I need to go out to other markets to satisfy my needs. Okay, so again, since each of us just specializes in producing a few products, as I just mentioned, we need markets to then buy and sell the other things that we need. So the typical person earns an income for that job. Like I'm specializing as a teacher, you might be specializing as an engineer, as a clerk, as a nurse, etc. So then, I use my income to then buy other products that I need, okay? So if we were all self-sufficient, meaning I could make my own furniture, I could sew my own clothes, I could grow all of my own food, we wouldn't need markets. But I think we can all see why we do, in fact, need markets. Okay? So in a free market economy, there's a voluntary exchange between people and businesses. We're exchanging money and products. Okay, so in free markets, individuals and privately owned businesses own the factors of production. So they're owning that land, labor, and capital. They make what they want, they buy what they want. So you might think that this is common sense, right? But as we learn about other market systems, we're going to see that this isn't always the case. So here in our country, if you are in fact this pizzeria owner, you are deciding on your menu, you are buying the supplies that you choose to buy. No one's telling you you can only make 100 pizzas a day and then you need to shut down for the day. You can only buy this type of tomato. You can only hire this many workers, right? They have the free reign because they privately own that business to decide on the factors of production. Okay, so that is a key tenet in a free market economy. Okay, so who is involved in free market economies? Well, there's a couple players. One is the households and firms, right? So households are, just your household, the people or a group of people living in the same residence. And they own the factors of production, their own land, labor, and capital. And they also go out to the marketplace to consume goods and services, right? So we go out as a household, the members of my household, my husband, my children, and I. And then we go to firms. You could also just call those businesses. And they are producing those goods, right? So they're taking those inputs, those factors of production, and then they're turning them into output goods, right? They're making cars, making clothes, making furniture, etc. that we are purchasing. All right. So in the factor market, firms, those businesses, purchase factors of production from households. Okay. So how would that work? So when we look at the circular diagram, hopefully it'll make a little more sense. The diagram is also available in your textbook if you want to look at it. But basically, firms purchase or rent land, they hire workers and pay them wages or salaries for their labor. So for example, firms have employees, right? So those employees live in households, they go to work, they earn an income, right? So that is in a sense that firm purchasing that labor, right? From your home, the purchasing your dad, as an office worker, paying his salary, purchasing your mom as a nurse, right? So firms also borrow money from households to purchase capital, right? So anything that we are spending at those firms, that those firms then use, again, to purchase more materials, more tools, etc. Okay. So all of this self-regulates. So how do we cooperate as households and individuals with the firms and give each other what they want? So, in this circular model, we're both giving and receiving. We're both giving and getting factor resources and products. So if you remember, hopefully this name sounds familiar, Adam Smith, right? The Wealth of Nations. Hopefully you learned about him in history class last year. So, Adam Smith said that it's competition and our own self-interest that keeps the marketplace functioning, okay? So basically, our economy is made up of multiple people, multiple businesses, multiple households, and we're all engaged in countless transactions each day. And, in one day, perhaps I'm shopping on Amazon, then I'm shopping on Staples.com, then I'm shopping on Sephora.com. All of those individual transactions are in my own self-interest, right? I want makeup. I need office supplies, right? And I'm getting something out of it. So I'm shopping at those businesses for my own personal gain. So I hope that makes sense. If you go out, again, it's hard to think of us out shopping at the mall right now, but if you were in the mall and you went into 4 or 5 stores that day and bought multiple items across different stores, you're doing that for your own self-interest. You needed something in that store or you wanted something in that store. So this self-interest is the motivating factor in the free market, right? It's not that the bakery, the Stop and Shop, they're not doing, they're not producing these goods, out of the good of their heart, right? They're doing that because it's in their own interest to sell us those products, right? So it goes both ways. There's Adam Smith. Okay. And then also how the market self-regulates is through competition, right? So, we are, yes, it's in our own self-interest to go purchase certain items, but we're not suckers, right? We're not going to pay really high prices for certain items. So we want to look for a lower price, right? That we have an incentive to do so. Okay, so incentives, right, can very much affect our behavior. So if we are at the mall and we want to buy a new pair of jeans and we go to the Gap and they're $79 for the Gap, and then we go across the way and at Old Navy they're very similar jeans and they're $40. That's an incentive for us to buy those jeans from Old Navy, right? They're cheaper, right? So that's a positive incentive of a lower price, right? Firms, of course, want to make profit, right? So they want to increase their sales. So we're going to see how that leads to competition. And again, none of this should be I don't think very confusing. It's things that you do every day. Look for a better price, or your parents look for better prices on certain items. And this is just a quick example about American Eagle. I don't know if that store even exists still, but it did in my day. So if they are selling both polka dot and striped shirts, the striped shirts are selling much better than the polka dots. That's an incentive for them to make more striped shirts, right? They're going to have more potential sales and profit. All right. So if other shirt makers or other clothing stores see this trend in striped shirts, they will also kind of jump in on that and try to take a piece of that profit and try to sell striped shirts as well, right? So here you go. Here's the example, right? If American Eagle is selling for $30 and Old Navy for $25, American Eagle has to be willing to drop their price because consumers are ultimately going to buy the cheaper good, the majority of them, right? So that's the competition, right? That competition, that struggle amongst producers for dollars of consumers is motivating them, right, to try to win your business. And that happens, I'm sure unless you're very brand loyal to certain clothes or certain makeup or certain beauty products, you usually will shop around and get the best deal that you can before purchasing. All right, so the invisible hand, that is really that self-interest and that competition at work, again, to regulate the marketplace. Okay, so that's going to lead consumers to produce certain goods and services and for firms to produce them. Okay, so I think, again, this is pretty, that invisible hand is like that regulation is happening without any sort of central plan or direction, right? It's kind of just happening on its own. All right, so the last couple things we're going to talk about today is just those economic goals that we went through yesterday or in section 1. So a free market economy really meets many of those goals. So if we just quickly go down the list, economic efficiency, right? It's a very efficient market. It's self-regulating. It's constantly adapting and responding to changing conditions. People, are shopping and they are letting producers know if they like a product and if they don't, and they're very quick to adapt those products, adapt those prices, etc. So it's very efficient. Freedom, it has a very high degree of freedom. Workers are free to work where we want. No one is telling us we need to be a manufacturer. No one is telling me that I need to be a teacher. I chose to be a teacher, etc. Right? Economic growth, all of that competition between firms really encourages innovation, right? In order again, to try to drive up your profits, drive up your sales. So it encourages growth. As we know, entrepreneurs are always looking for profitable opportunities. So, economic growth is absolutely apparent. And, additional goals as well, because we have such a wide variety of goods and services, we really, producers have incentives to meet consumers' demands, right? So it's consumers deciding what is produced. So that's called consumer sovereignty. If we all love, if you think about cars, we went from a trend of like having minivans to having SUVs with that third seat, right? That became really, really popular once people started buying that from one or two car companies. All the other car companies basically copied the idea because consumers love it and they're going to purchase it, right? So they're kind of driving a lot of the producers' decisions, right? So that concept is called consumer sovereignty, right? The consumer is king. And just to wrap up, there's many advantages of the free market system, which I hope now you realize. There are advantages, but no pure market economy actually exists. So you might be saying, what do you mean, Ms. O'Brien? We just talked about this. But you're going to see that as we continue on with our conversations, it is not 100% purely free. We do have some direction from the government, which we will talk about in another lesson. So what happens is this free market system eventually gets modified in order to meet economic goals. And again, we're going to talk about this in section 4. See you then.